Welcome back to the B2B Playbook. Today we are sharing our simple 3-step B2B demand generation strategy for 2026. We're going to briefly recap what demand generation is, what problems it solves for your go-to-market, and then share our 3-step framework for building and implementing your demand generation strategy in 2026. This is a strategy that has helped marketing teams go from largely supporting sales to contributing 70% of pipeline to the business, or like this very happy marketer, Alistair Hamilton, on my screen, helping them 3x their pipeline, work closer with sales, and be more of a hero for the business. I am, of course, joined by my co-host, Kevin Chen. Kevin, for those who are just joining us for the first time, could you please share what our 5Bs framework is all about and how it connects to what we're talking about today?
Yeah, of course, George. So the 5Bs framework is our framework for really doing sustainable B2B marketing in general. Of course, a big part of that is demand generation, and it's our framework for helping you do that. And that's how it's connected to today. Specifically, when we look at our 5Bs framework, we talk about be ready, which is deeply understanding your dream customers, be helpful, which is developing relationships of trust with them, particularly online, be seen, how to amplify those relationships of trust, particularly with the focus areas around your dream customers. And be better, we then talk about how to optimize the B2B marketing process that you've built up until that point. And finally, in Be the Best, we talk about the advanced strategies and tactics that the guys at the bigger end of town use, how you can apply them into your own marketing practices, and how you can use the 5Bs framework as a flywheel, which George is bringing up on the whiteboard now, how you can use that as a flywheel to keep getting value from the framework and keep growing your business.
Everything's got to be a flywheel, Kevin. It always looks better when it's a flywheel. And that's exactly what our 5Bs framework does. And that's what we're going to talk you through today, because that really is the core of our demand generation framework. And for those who really understand the fundamentals of marketing, a lot of it ties back to the 4Ps of marketing too. We just like to think that we filled in some of the gaps a little bit more with our framework. Now, getting back to demand generation, let's go back to defining what it is. What is demand generation? We've probably updated our definition a little bit since last year, Kevin. This year, Kevin, demand generation, in my view, is really a system that builds awareness, trust, and memory with your market. So when a buyer's priorities change, you are the brand that they choose. It's not about forcing timing. It's about really staying connected to your buyers and their needs. It also really connects marketing, sales, and customer success around how buyers actually make decisions, which is a lot messier than we would like to admit. It's a lot less linear than we would hope. And it's much more driven by internal triggers that are often outside of our control, or market conditions that are difficult for us to control too. So demand generation doesn't really force someone to care. It really makes sure that you're kept top of mind, that people really understand your product. So when the buyer's priorities shift, you're the first brand that they turn to. So again, it's a system. It helps you build awareness, trust, and memory with your market long before your buyers are ready to buy. Something that we'll get to, Kevin, is that it helps shape the 95% of buyers who are out of market, i.e. not looking to buy right now, and helps capture and support the 5% of buyers who are actively shopping and looking to buy right now. Something I'd like to double down on, Kevin, is this notion that we can't force someone to buy. As much as we would like to think in our marketing that we can force people to buy, this happens a lot less often than one would think, especially in a B2B situation. I think, Kevin, when it comes to B2C marketing, we can often play on people's fears and insecurities, and you might buy that useless piece of technology on a whim, or you might buy the latest thing that elongates your neck to relieve back pain because it's hit you at the right time and you've really tried to amplify that person's pain. But in B2C, you're the only stakeholder, right? If you go and buy that stupid gadget, you could keep it to yourself, Kevin, and no one will ever hear about it. You'll probably share it with me and I'll laugh at you. But the point is, it's on you. In B2B, however, you're making decisions not just on your own, but there's a whole bunch of people who will scrutinize that decision. So if you change CRMs and you go from maybe HubSpot to Pipedrive or something, and all of a sudden the marketing team stops using it, or maybe the sales team hate it, that decision is on you. It can be a professional risk. It's why that saying nobody gets fired for hiring IBM still holds true today, because you don't make decisions in a vacuum. And that's why very often in B2B, you're not really forcing someone to buy. Prioritization happens when a trigger hits. So there's often some kind of trigger, often internal or external to the business, that means they come into market and need your product or service right now. That can be something like a new leadership change, you have a new mandate. There could be just simply, Kevin, and this is the most common one, you're up for renewal. Hey, if we have a CRM, our contract is due to renew with HubSpot in October 2026. Guess what we're going to be doing from July onwards? We're going to be examining, did we want to engage with them for another 2 or 3 year contract? Who else is out there? Is it worth changing? So renewal is a great trigger. Is there a budget reset? Has there been a process failure internally? Has there just been a mandate from above? Has the board set a new strategic objective that means that all of a sudden this new thing is worth pursuing? That's where a lot of AI companies, Kevin, are benefiting right now, because companies are saying, hey, there's a mandate to investigate how can we use AI to do things more efficiently as a business. So prioritization happens when triggers hit. We can't really manufacture that as much as we would hope.
It's probably also worth calling out listeners and viewers that these days, as you would know, the buying journey is pretty complicated. It gets messier year by year, and it's definitely non-linear. We always like that traditional view in marketing of a funnel, but realistically, that's not how these triggers hit. They hit at different times. They are all different in and amongst themselves from company to company, within an industry, whatever that might be. Combined with the fact that you can't force someone to care and you can't force someone to buy, have to wait for these trigger points, which are getting messier and messier to figure out and keep on top of. That's where the demand gen really comes in. It really connects all your marketing, sales, customer success touch points, and it really creates that understanding of what that buyer journey looks like and making sure that you're there with the buyer from start to end, all the way through the process, and so that you can start to shape that buying decision right from the beginning with that 95% of buyers who are out of market, and it supports the activity leading up to that final conversation where they become that 5% that are ready to buy and you're top of mind at that point of view. So in practice, demand gen really builds awareness of the problem right from the get-go. It builds memory of your brand with your potential buyers before, as George said, those buyers are in market. And it builds trust that you're ultimately the right solution for them. Your brand will be the right solution for them when that contract comes up, when that budget resets and they're ready for a different solution. It helps your brand stay visible across that buying journey until that trigger point that ultimately leads them to that buying decision.
And as you said, Kev, it's not linear. I've got a linear line here. I'm going to actually just scribble that out. So if that's the starting point of the buying journey, that's the ending point that ends with the purchase. Looks a lot more like this, Kevin. And for those who are listening, I'm just drawing a whole lot of really squiggly lines. And it's very difficult for us to track as marketers. We can't possibly track it all. We can get different signals and pick up different touch points along the way, but most of the buying journey is happening in the dark and we can't see it all. And there's a lot of moving pieces that we can't all possibly see. And this will come back to our framework, Kevin. The best that we can do as marketers is very deeply understand the market that we are serving, validate that there's a very real need for our product in it, position ourselves as a total no-brainer, and then by speaking to customers, map out firsthand what information, resources do they really need from us that they're going to use at some point on that buying journey, which is a messy journey. But marketing is all about one-to-many, one-to-few communication. How can we have that available as advertising, as content, so people can educate themselves, so they can be aware of our brand, so they can tie what we do to the problem that they have. So when they start reaching that endpoint, when they start evaluating us against others, that they think of us before anyone else. That's what we really need to do here. Now, core components of demand generation, Kevin, and we've already spoken about it, in-market and out-of-market buyers. I've got a great graph here, a great image from the B2B Institute, which did some good research, which shows us the 95-5 rule. The 95-5 rule is a well-held rule and a general rule that says at any given point in time, only 5% of your market are in market looking to buy right now, and 95% of your market are out of market. Think back to the CRM example I gave you before. If you have just signed a deal with HubSpot literally a month ago, and then Pipedrive come knocking on your door saying, hey, do you want to try Pipedrive? You've just signed a contract with HubSpot. You're a month into it. You're not thinking about CRMs. You've signed a 2-year deal. You're probably not going to evaluate that for 18 months. So you're not in market. So a lot of their messaging, a lot of their marketing is not really going to impact you that much. You're certainly not going to be in that evaluation stage. So just think logically about how you buy things, about how you make B2B purchasing decisions, and this 95-5 rule will make a lot of sense to you. Build preference with that 95% of future buyers and support and capture those in-market buyers, those 5% who are ready to buy. So yes, we of course want to compete trying to find those 5% that are ready to buy, being in those conversations where people are actively evaluating you. And that's where you do things like run advertising on review sites, and you are running high intent Google ads, and you were doing all the things to try and capture those in-market buyers. Where people are expressing intent, they're ready to buy, that's the place that you want to be. But then we also need to balance that out with reaching these future buyers, building trust, educating, building memory. So when they come into market, they think of you first.
So listeners and viewers, if you take anything out of today's session, it's that demand gen, as we like to define it, really has two key components. You're looking at shaping that future demand with 95% of the market who aren't ready to buy. And then you're also helping capture demand with the 5% of the market that is ready to buy. So it's both components. Often we just confuse that with just the capturing demand piece, which is what a lot of marketers are focusing on because it's easy to measure, easy to show value in the work that we're doing. But it's important to also do that future demand piece, because as you can see, most of the activity should actually be there because that's where most people live at any given time. And it's important to shape that demand before they get into that last 5% where they're ready to buy.
Kevin, I think always a helpful way to look at this is looking at the 5 stages of awareness, which is, to be honest, more of a messaging framework, but I think it's still good to help us visualize really what messages we want out there to really reach future buyers versus capturing those existing buyers too. So the 5 stages of awareness is from Eugene Schwartz. It really maps out the buying journey. What questions your buyers are asking from when they're unaware, they're not even aware that they have a problem or a need that your product or service can address, to problem aware, where they realize they have a problem but they don't know that there are solutions available, to solutions aware, comparing your solutions against others in market, or product aware, comparing your product against others in market, and then most aware, they're on that edge and they're waiting for that right trigger to really finally make that purchasing decision. The 5 stages of awareness, again, unaware, problem aware, solution aware, product aware, most aware. It's a nice way to really map things out and really map out, again, as I said, what questions buyers have at each stage of the journey. And I think, Kevin, where a lot of marketers go wrong is they're often focusing on solution aware, product aware, and most aware generally. And look, that's a great place to start because you're really looking to capture demand there and you're exhausting that 5% who are ready to buy right now. And of course, we want to get in front of them. But the wider portion of the market, what enables you to scale is getting into those that are unaware, problem aware, those that are out of market, they're not actively looking for a solution. They're the ones who we need to get in front of, because when they come into market and they're ready to buy, they're a lot more likely to choose you over the competition. And it tends to be a much more efficient and effective way to win new customers as well. So the 5 stages of awareness is a really nice funnel. I know funnel is not a cool word to say anymore, Kevin, but it's a really nice, I think, visualization of the buying journey. Not that it's linear, but just a great system to map the different questions your buyers are going to have to each stage of your journey. And probably one good caveat here, Kevin, is when you're doing this exercise and mapping this out for each of your customers, make sure that those questions are not ones that you have made up, but you have very genuinely sourced from first-hand qualitative interviews from your best customers as well.
And I know, listeners, that sounds a bit daunting to say, oh, actually we had to do all this extra stuff, or we had to pay most of our attention to this stuff that's a lot harder to measure, a lot harder to show value in by doing this content in the unaware, problem aware stages. But something that's often overlooked is that if you do that process right, if you're actually talking to your dream customers with the pain points that they want, you can actually get a lot of signals and conversations happening where you get so much insight, so much helpful insight for actually making that last leg of the journey, that capturing demand, so much more efficient. And what we mean by this is, if you can gather those signals at the unaware, problem or solutions aware content stage to see where the main pain points are, what's really driving a lot of the interest engagement in your marketing activity in your content side, then you can use those as conversation starters when you get to having a one-on-one conversation or one-to-few conversation with your dream customers. And more importantly, when we get onto the concept of cataloging the market, as you're doing that activity in the earlier stages to formulate that content for shaping demand, you'll actually figure out exactly when people are going to market, exactly when those trigger points are. So you can pass that information on to your other half of the brain who's looking after capturing the demand. So that might be a different person or even the sales team in a bigger organization. But if you're a one-man band, that means you have all the information you need to figure out exactly when to run those capture demand campaigns, exactly to who, and what messaging will work best with them if you've done those earlier stages of awareness and cataloging the market correctly.
That's a great point, Kevin. The worst thing we can do as marketers is wait to have conversations until someone is actually ready to buy from us. We need to get in front of them early, exactly to your point, because that's where all the juicy information is. Just one more point, Kevin, before we get to that 3-step demand gen plan about why it is so important to reach those future buyers. On top of the 95-5 rule, Kevin, there's some research from Bain which shows that when B2B buyers make a decision, they actually make a shortlist. And if your company or brand isn't on that shortlist on day one of starting to do their research, then there's a very low chance that they will actually purchase from you. So people might think, oh, we have this enormous total addressable market that can buy from us, and founders love to keep their TAM really broad and talk about how big their TAM is. But the reality is your TAM is not your ICP. Your ideal customers are the ones who are more likely to buy from you. And we can see on my whiteboard, that's a much smaller segment of your total addressable market. And then, Kevin, the reality of that is only 5% of your ICP are in market looking to buy right now. So that's an even smaller segment to your in-market buyers, which shows these are the ones who are in market, plus would consider your company if you have not reached them before they're actually looking to buy right now, meaning you haven't done any brand work, you haven't shaped future demand, you haven't reached them before they enter that buying cycle. There's a very small chance that they would even consider your company. That's just what the research says. And so I think it's a nice visualization of, hey, this is who you think is available to you. This is the reality of who is actually available to you. And that's why so often it feels like finding a needle in a haystack, because it is. That's the reality. And that's why it's so important to reach those future buyers and not just focus on the 5% that are in market. Finally, Kev, just modern demand generation objectives for 2026. What do we want to do with it? We want to make sure that leads are better quality and they're more ready to buy. We want to use the data to align marketing and sales teams and really be that unifying function between them that really aligns to the ideal customer. It should allow us to scale beyond in-market buyers, and there'll be some overlap and some connection with brand there as well. We want to be a better fit for customers that are less price sensitive, and we want to focus on quality versus quantity. And this again takes us to our 5Bs framework for demand generation, Kevin, our beautiful flywheel that we referenced at the opening, which is, of course, be ready, be helpful, be seen, be better, and be the best. We detail that every week here on the B2B Playbook. Today, we're really going to focus on the first 3 of our 5Bs framework, share what they are, and then just share how we actually implement them ourselves as a business. Okay, Kevin, we are separating this into shaping demand with future buyers, as we spoke about, and capturing demand with in-market buyers. The first step, be ready, is all about finding those ideal customer segments that we want to target. And that starts with an 80-20 analysis to really define who your best customers are. Why is that so important, Kevin, for us to define, first of all, who are our best customers?
Just quite simply, it really focuses in on exactly who you should be speaking to. As marketers, in-house B2B marketers with very limited resources, you don't actually have the resources, whether that's money or time or just pure manpower, to go after everybody in that TAM that George was talking about earlier. You have to focus in on your dream customers, on those that are already performing best for you and try and get more of them, because that's where the economy of scales happen. That's where you can get that uplift, where you can hone in on that 20% that's driving 80% of the revenue in your business. So doing that 80/20 analysis will hopefully give you a very clear idea, and importantly, a documented version of exactly who your best customers are. And that's really important because that allows you to communicate that and align the rest of the business around who indeed your dream customers are.
And it allows you to effectively segment the market, doesn't it, Kevin, in a way that's most useful to your business. And we talk about segmentation, targeting, positioning. I think what we do in Be Ready, Kevin, is really provide more color to that and the process of how to actually do what is quite a foundational principle of marketing, starting with that 80/20 analysis, right? The 80/20 analysis reveals who are our best customers, not just in terms of revenue, but who's the best fit for our business. And revenue isn't the only thing. It could be profitability. It could be potential to scale. It might be that they're in an industry which is experiencing some good tailwinds because there's an external market force, which means that is going to have a lot of need for your product or service in the very near future. So doing this 80/20 analysis, it's important not to just do it blanket revenue alone, but factor in what's really important for your business. And then once you've really defined who those segments are, you got to choose which ones you're going to target, because we've all got limited time, resources, and budget. We can't be targeting a bunch of different segments. We've got to make strategic bets over which ones we want to really double down on. And once we select those, we have to do our positioning and position our company as a complete no-brainer for them. But before that, Kevin, I think it makes sense for us to actually talk to some customers or prospects that are in that target segment that we want to put our strategic bet on. And so that means literally getting in front of them and talking to them to find out why you were such a great fit for them currently, what need they have for you, how you help them, how it helped them in their role, what return did they get from working with you, how do they make buying decisions. All this information helps you formulate your own strategic go-to-market plan so you can go out there and find more customers like them. And I know a lot of marketers had a lot of challenges speaking to customers directly to do that. Try and get that information from sales, try and get that information from customer success as well, or go and speak to someone like Ryan Paul Gibson, who helps you do this from an outsourced point of view. Sometimes it helps to outsource the customer research process. It just gets more buy-in. It's just something that we've seen worth considering. So 80/20 analysis, do the customer interviews to really understand them. Then that informs your positioning and your messaging, which again is making sure that you are positioned to be a complete no-brainer in the mind of your dream customers. In the same way that Pipedrive goes out there and says, we are the CRM that is built by salespeople for salespeople, they are very clearly stating who it is that they are serving, what market it is they're serving, and it is very much targeted at people who are in sales, who either hate the complexity of Salesforce or their organization isn't big enough to use something like that yet, or they hate how marketing focused HubSpot is. So update your positioning and messaging. And then once we get all that information, Kevin, we want to document our ICP. Now, Kevin, in your experience, why is it so important to actually document this information in not like a persona, but an ideal customer profile that you can share around the team?
Part of it is because you've gathered all this information just now through your customer interviews, through your 80/20 analysis. Let's not waste that good work. A lot of it will get forgotten, and a lot of the detail will get forgotten if you don't document this information. And in particular, when you try and disseminate and align the whole team within your business, your internal organization around your findings, it's important to have something like a documented ICP to really help that conversation along, to make sure that when someone is thinking about, hey, who are we actually targeting again in 6 months' time, they have something concrete to go back to and really see exactly what was discussed, exactly what was agreed upon. Because trust me, 6 months or 12 months down the track, your sales team, your customer success team, even yourself, won't remember what came out of your 80/20 analysis, probably won't remember the exact quote that person in your team had with that particular dream customer. And that's where the documented ICPs and documenting all the information you've gathered up until that point comes in handy. And of course, it'll come in handy when you go to the next step of producing that helpful content, of producing the things that map to the 5 stages of awareness. All those things will hopefully be able to pull from this documented ICP and the quotes and the information that gets out of your customer interview so that you can really hone in and get that cut through that really needs to happen with your content.
And that's a little side plug for our demand gen program, the B2B Incubator, Kevin. We take you through this process. We give you the strategy, the templates, and the tools to do it, and we make you document it too. Then, of course, we're on hand to answer any questions you might have too, because that documentation process is really important, as you said, to make sure that the rest of the team has access to this. And that's why, Kevin, also when it comes to identifying who your ideal customers are, the best outcomes we see is when marketers don't go and do this journey alone, but they bring leadership, sales, and customer success along with them for the ride, because then you have buy-in from everyone and you have everyone agree on these are who our ideal customers are. This is where we're going to focus our limited resources and attention on because of XYZ reasons. Very often ICP documents are born and die just within marketing alone. And that's where you have this big disjointed approach between sales and marketing that makes you far less effective as an organization. So bring people along the journey for you. That could even just start by sending across like a few questions to each department asking who are your favorite customers and why. And you'll probably get answers from each department, but that's a good starting point to even just find out who they like working with and why. And that's going to start to tell you about who your ideal customers are. And then, Kev, as you said, the next step is to map that buying journey, which is really mapping up the questions that they have across the 5 stages of awareness. What questions do they have at each stage? What is important for them to help make a business decision to say that, yes, you were a good fit for them versus someone else? That's what you're going to get from the market firsthand. They're literally going to tell you that information. And then a step here, Kevin, that I've added here, I haven't even done a fancy box for it, but the final step there is cataloging the market. And that's something that we've borrowed from CRO school, which we have with 2-time CRO and 7-time sales leader Adam Mandarovich, which is all about cataloging your market. Now, what is cataloging your market? Cataloging your market is either getting an SDR or a BDR to go out there and one by one in every account that is in your ICP, find out who are they with, as in what current vendor do they use? What do they like about that solution? What don't they like about it? What do they pay for it? When does their contract end for that existing vendor? And do you have permission to circle back to them at a future date? Now, what that does, Kevin, is that gives us an incredible feedback loop of information from one-to-one conversations that we're having, live conversations with the market, and then we can feed that information back into all this be ready analysis and information that we're doing. And we can start to build a living map of our market. Imagine as a marketer, if someone gave you a database with exactly who the vendor is that your customer is already using, i.e. your competitor, what they like about it, what they don't like about it, how much they pay, permission to circle back at the right time when their contract ends. We would know when's the right time to strike. What creative do we need to have? What messaging do we need to have to push in front of these people? Because we know that their pain is XYZ. So we can make creative and messaging campaigns around XYZ. This is a really important step. And this is something that every team needs to go back to doing. It is something that the business development role used to do, Kevin. I don't know how this is going to evolve over the next 5 years, whether maybe it's going to be like a market development officer or someone comes in and takes control of this. But we need to get back to cataloging our market, which aligns us to the reality of how a buyer buys. And the beauty of it, Kevin, as well, is maybe you catalog someone, they tell you, oh, I like XYZ about my solution, and you know that your product doesn't do XYZ. That's really good, valuable information to either feed back into disqualification criteria saying these people are not a good fit for us, or it might go back to product as well and say, hey, product, we have a whole bunch of people who want these features, and if we build them out by this timeline, then we have a whole host of potential new customers that we could go and get out in front of. So cataloging the market cap, that's probably been the biggest update, I would think, this year to our demand gen strategy. Would you agree?
Yeah, definitely. I think we hint at it and we get some of that information from our framework for customer interviews, but it's really a different thing because the customer interview stuff is really looking at your existing customers, but this extra step gives you that additional layer of context and information that really sharpens your focus when you get to doing that content, when you get to doing the capture of the market as well as the demand gen and shaping the demand with your content, because now you have real information about your dream customers who aren't in your sphere of influence yet and how exactly to tap into them.
And that then takes us to step 2. Step 2 is what we call be helpful, which is really about developing relationships of trust with those future buyers. So when they come into market, they think of you first. And it really comes back to that 5 stages of awareness, that buying journey, making sure that we have systems to constantly reiterate our key messages in response to each of those questions, and having a system for creating really genuinely helpful content. So again, when they're in market, they think of us first. Now, this isn't just about talking about our product and its features all the time, but we want to talk about content and themes that is relevant to the buyers to help them get their jobs done as they are now, but also tie to the logical conclusion of your product or service. So I think, hopefully, Kevin, we're a decent example of that, right? The B2B Playbook, we share our 5Bs framework for demand generation. And we're not always talking about our marketing program, the B2B Incubator. We're not always talking about our agency services. But the natural conclusion of a lot of this stuff is, hey, if you want to do this the fast way, the in-depth way, and the accountable way, join our programs. Like, it's where you will go and implement our frameworks. We are the natural conclusion of everything that we talk about. We've had some great examples of this come out of the B2B Incubator as well. A really good one was from a company called Rivet, who sell construction software. And they basically sell to contractors. They mapped out all the really difficult things that go on when you're a contractor and you're trying to manage a lot of different people on job site. And so they built a podcast called the Construction is Hard podcast, or it was a show. And they built a mini series of 10 episodes, which basically went through a great framework of how to manage your labor on work sites better. And they broke it down into a whole lot of subtopics, and it killed it. Their industry absolutely loved it. It got picked up by industry publications. It actually ended up leading to a lot of pipeline for them, because not only did it show that they understood their ICP, but they were talking to them in a way that made them go, oh, hey, and if you have these problems, guess what? Our piece of software is a great fit for you. It would be wrong of us to not mention it. So I think that's a really good way to think about helpful content, Kevin, and that's what we really look at part 2 in the Be Helpful section of our 5Bs framework. And that can all, again, be tied to those 5 stages of awareness. And then, Kev, we also want to make sure that the way that we are getting that content out there is based on a content repurposing system. Content repurposing is very important, isn't it, Kev?
Yeah, definitely. You want to make sure that the helpful content that you've built is being utilized, but at the same time, you need to produce more content to meet every single one of those stages in the 5 stages of awareness and in the different channels that your potential dream customers are in. You need a system that helps you get that content volume out there, but at the same time still remain really relevant, really helpful to your dream customers, to your documented ICPs, to whoever you want to talk to, because it's easy to hit the volume game, it's easy to hit the quality game, but to hit both, you really need that system there to make sure that everything is working together. And obviously we do that ourselves. We have this pillar piece of content with the podcast, with the video podcast, and we're able to have a system that produces a lot of different content from that one pillar piece of content, but it relies on the expertise that comes out of that piece of content. So that helpfulness continues right the way through as it takes on different shapes and forms through the different channels.
It's also a great system for capturing insights from subject matter experts. I think unless you're marketing to marketers, you're not going to be the one who has the subject matter expertise, right? So if your subject matter experts or engineers, making sure that you're capturing them with the core of that information, because they're a voice and have the expertise that your audience will trust, making sure you have systems to capture that. And then your content repurposing system is then what turns that into the articles and newsletters, but it's still relying on their voice, their strong point of view, which is tied back to your brand. So repurposing systems are very important. And then finally, step 3, So again, we had Be Ready, which was really deeply defining who your ICP is and how you will serve them. Stage 2, Be Helpful, building relationships of trust with them. Stage 3 is all about distribution. How are we actually getting that messaging, that information in front of people? It's no good creating all this information and it just sitting on your website or sitting in some LinkedIn post that no one sees. It's about how can we get the best bang for our buck and make sure that we get our content, our messaging, our advertising, our point of view in front of our ideal customers. And that comes back to just identifying where is it they hang out, both online and offline. A way that we like to break this down to communication can really be done one-to-many, one-to-few, or one-to-one. One-to-many examples might be like paid advertising, organic social, YouTube, forums, newsletters, industry publications. One-to-few could be webinars, events, LinkedIn groups, that kind of thing. And then one-to-one is generally emailing, calling, text. Now, marketing traditionally is best at the one-to-many and one-to-few, and we often enable sales to help with that one-to-one perspective as well. So map these out, map down the different places that your ICP hang out on the one-to-many, one-to-few, one-to-one basis. And then again, you're going to make strategic bets based on the amount of budget you have available. Where is the best place for you to invest those resources? It's not going to be all of them all at once because chances are you don't have the budget to support that. And that is the steps, Kevin, for reaching those 95% of future buyers. Again, be ready, be helpful, be seen. They're the core ones. Then, Kevin, in terms of reaching the 5% who are in market, capturing in market buyers, that's part of our framework too. We have account-based marketing, which is taking a narrower view and a high-touch one-to-one process with sales and marketing combining to win over a handful of accounts to understand them a lot more deeply. That goes into things like how to do podcast collaborations, content collaborations to build trust with decision makers. That's much more involved and a very common technique upmarket as well. And then, of course, capturing high intent demand, which is what we spoke about earlier, doing things like running Google Ads, review site advertising, all the places that your customers are hanging out and showing high intent to buy right now, making sure that we're in the right places. And that is our demand gen plan, our 3-step demand gen plan, Kevin, for 2026. Is there anything that we need to add before we share quickly how we've been implementing this for ourselves?
No, not really, George. I think that pretty much covers it. I think, as you said, the biggest change from 2025 is that we've added cataloging the market in there. And I think it really rounds out exactly how everything connects together, particularly with the sales team, where traditionally there might be a bit of friction. Hopefully this will help you get on the same page with that team.
Beautiful. Okay, simple demand generation plan. Kevin, this is how you and I are reaching future buyers with everything that we do. First of all, our niche, ICP alignment, who we're really targeting. It's mostly demand generation marketers. We've probably expanded that, Kevin, to B2B marketers in smaller teams that are resource strapped. That's who we're targeting. So we did our 80-20 analysis to identify that they're probably our best listeners. They're the best purchasers of our products, the best purchasers of our agency services as well. We are adding cataloging to our process as well. So what we're doing is we are looking for signals to see who is engaging with our materials, with our social presence out there that is also an ICP fit. We use tools like Dealfront and Leadfeeder to show us that. So we might see a company called X is viewing our website. We will use that as a signal to then go outbound to them. And what I will do is basically look to catalog that account. That might be with a live call. It might be with a LinkedIn DM. And I'm not calling to sell. I'm basically calling to find out, hey, are you doing any marketing training? If so, who do you use? What do you like about it? What don't you like about it? How often do you train? What time of year do you train? Can I put something else on the table for you to review in advance of this? What topics do you want to hear about? And then this just gives me a whole lot of cataloged information for every account out there to find out what's the status quo, where do we need to be, and do I have permission to circle back to them in the future? So that's helping make our programs better to match what the market wants, but it's also enabling us to more deeply understand our ideal customers every time we do it. And there might be some out there that just don't have any budget and never will have any budget. And in that case, okay, great. like we know that they're probably not a great fit for us right now, in which case our free content is fine. So that's how we have implemented the Be Ready stage for what we're doing and how we've implemented cataloging too. Sometimes we do that in other creative ways, like preparing an industry report and basically saying, if you want to get this industry report, you have to give us the information that would equate to a catalog as well. So fill that in first, you get the industry report in return. Something else that we've been playing around with, which has actually had some pretty good outcomes too. Then part 2, mapping our content to the buying journey. We're always sharing our 5Bs framework for demand generation. We know what questions our buyers have because they're always telling us, because we're always finding it out from them firsthand. Our pillar piece of content is this show that you are watching right now. We record this every single week. And then we have a repurposing engine where this episode becomes a 40-minute YouTube video, a 40-minute podcast. It becomes our LinkedIn post for the week. It becomes YouTube shorts, TikToks. It becomes our weekly newsletter and an extended article as well. And so these are all good supporting pieces that lead up to our pillar piece of content. That process roughly takes us 4 to 5 hours a week because we've really nailed down the process behind it. And it captures not just our subject matter expertise, but when we have guests on the podcast as well. They are also subject matter experts, and that's a great way for us to capture their intel, connect it with our brand, and distribute it as well. And then finally, distribution. How are we getting in front of our niche ICP? We run paid ads, mostly LinkedIn ads, a bit of Meta as well. People see us organically on social, on YouTube. We have our newsletter as well that we have a couple of thousand subscribers to. One to few, we appear as guests on webinars, events. We actually host our own yearly virtual summit called Full Circle. We had 500 marketers attend it last year. We're hoping to get even more this year. That's December 9 and December 10. Make sure you check it out at Full Circle. I think it's b2bfullcircle.com. And then one-to-one, emailing, calling, texting. We're probably doing more calling and texting. That's going outbound to people that we want to catalog as well. So that's how we are implementing this 3-step demand generation plan for 2026. Hopefully we have kept things a little bit more simple. It's just identifying who it is you want to serve, what you need to say to them, how you're going to say it, and how to get that information in front of them. There's going to be activities you do one-to-one. That's going to be divided up between marketing and sales, and you need to have a system to work together.
Well, listeners, there you have it. Key takeaways for this episode. If you want to build the most efficient go-to-market strategy in 2026, demand gen should be a big part of it. And we've gone through today to talk about what demand gen is, how it's comprised of both shaping future demand with the 90% of the market who are not ready to buy, and also capturing demand with the 5% that are in market and ready to buy. Remember, the earlier you start, the more influence you have over those future buyers and the more successful everything will be. So your 2026 go-to-market plan should consist at least of those first 3 stages of our framework. Be ready, be helpful, and be seen.
Beautiful. Thank you, Kevin. Okay, listeners and viewers, you can find links to everything that we discussed in the show notes. If you do want to take action on this, check out the B2B Incubator. You can find that on the b2bplaybook.com or just search the B2B Incubator. That's our demand generation program that shows you and takes you by the hand, step by step, and how to do this. We do have cohorts that start every quarter. We also have an on-demand module available at different price points too. As always, we are so grateful that every week more and more marketers tune in every Monday to the B2B Playbook. If we could ask one thing, it would be to please pass the show on to someone who you think would get value from it. Also, check us out on YouTube, subscribe, comment, do all those things. That's an amazing help for us. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for your time as always, Kevin. Take care and catch you next week.
Thank you, listeners and viewers. Take care and catch you all next week.